Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Colorado Protectors Podcast. I'm Frank Gale. I'll be hosting this episode. Our guests today are appearing from the Facing Fentanyl group. We have Andrea Thomas, who is the founder and president of Facing Fentanyl, Inc., and also the co-founder and executive director of Voices for Awareness, and Ashley's mom. Dan Bontz is from Voices for Awareness, the Voices for Awareness Foundation, and the Facing Fentanyl, Inc. Organization. He's a detective in Loveland Police Department, Region 4, Northern Colorado Drug Task Force, and he is the Region 4 Vice President for the Colorado Drug Investigators Association. Dan, due to the nature of his work, will not be appearing, and so you won't see his face on the podcast today. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Thank you for having us.
Can each of you tell us just a little bit, about yourselves and how you became involved with the organization, both the organizations, Facing Fentanyl and Voices for Awareness?
Yeah, well, like you said, I'm Ashley's mom. And first and foremost, being the mother of 4 children is very important to me. In 2018, I lost Ashley to half of a counterfeit pill. I didn't know what illicit fentanyl was then. My family didn't know. Ashley certainly didn't know. She wouldn't have taken something that was so deadly and could take her life, right? She was a mom of a 7-year-old at the time and was given what looked like a prescription medication from someone that she trusted and loved. And that half of pill that she took when she was out of her own took her life and took it almost instantly. The person that gave Ashley this pill, like I said, loved her and she loved him. He had no idea what he was giving her was going to take her life. And in 24 hours, after losing Ashley, his grief, the burden of what had happened, he took his own life. And so 2 families forever devastated from this little half of a pill. Shortly after I lost Ashley, Colorado law enforcement had put out a PSA with a picture of those 2 little blue pills. And when I saw that and saw what it was explaining, I knew then there's other people. This didn't just happen to our family. It wasn't a fluke, right? A one-time thing. So immediately we started talking to people and getting the message out. And, in my rural town in Grand Junction, Colorado, in 2018, there was one fentanyl dealer, right? And he was responsible for taking many, many lives. And we weren't hearing about it. And it was something that we had to address. My family felt very sure that we had to tell people and really spare them of what had happened to us. So it wasn't a week. And we hit the ground running and reaching out to our media and sharing this message. Still not even having all the facts, right? Just knowing there was this dangerous pill out there, not knowing about the other drugs. So shortly after that, I started Voices for Awareness, and from Voices for Awareness grew Facing Fentanyl, which is now the home of the National Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day. And our work has spanned the country. When we started doing this with Voices, Colorado was resistant to hearing the message. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to scare people. And really what we needed to do was warn them right away. So that was a blessing and a curse. And, the blessing was that it pushed me to move nationally with these organizations. And the curse was that Coloradans continued to die. So from those organizations, we've now built a new organization called Armor Families. And we work the science, the innovation, and the data pieces of this. And we're happy today to announce that Dan's going to be a part of that too. So what he does on the front lines, he can now help with solutions that can be global, not just in Colorado.
That's great. Dan, you want to tell us a little bit about how you became involved?
Yeah, so Frank, like I said, I've been with the Loveland Police Department for over 27 years. I'm currently assigned to the Northern Colorado Drug Task Force, and I am the Region 4 Vice President for the Colorado Drug Investigators Association, which is important. And it's important because when we talk about narcotics, we talk about deaths related to that. We talk about the ripple effects, which we'll get into during this conversation. it's important that law enforcement has representation and has a seat in this arena when we talk about sitting down at a table with a multitude of folks. And so I'm very honored to be on the advisory board for Facing Fentanyl. I'm very honored to have been asked to be part of the new Armor Group. But I think that, it really shows that there's a need for this stuff and for law enforcement to participate. I've done narcotics work, different related assignments for a good portion of my career. And so we have seen the transition of, the drugs and the potential and the danger and the deaths and the things associated with it as it stands today. So back in June of 2022, Denver hosted a fentanyl summit, and it was primarily law enforcement officers, hundreds of them, downtown at one of the big facilities. And it was then when it was all centered around fentanyl, the science, the politics, legislative stuff, all those things. But the most impactful piece of those 2 days was when Andrea and some parents got up and spoke about their personal experience with fentanyl, the loss of their loved ones. And it was very impactful to hear how some of those folks felt like law enforcement they didn't care about their family member or their loved one that was lost to fentanyl, but it was more like they were treated as a number. And it was very disheartening, and it was very sad to hear, especially when the panel of folks, including Andrea first and foremost, is very supportive of law enforcement, very supportive of our efforts, very supportive of change for legislation, anything that we can do to work together. Encompassing all sides, but certainly to give law enforcement a voice and some validation in this arena. So it was shortly after that that I reached out to Andrea through the website, and we connected and did some educational cards and some things that we can talk about later that we hand out on overdose deaths that we investigate. We investigate those up north in our area. And so it was really a good way to connect with families. And it was a good way to feel like that we were pushing the narrative of this is a much larger scale of things. And I have been very blessed to be part of that. So that's kind of where we sit here today.
I mean, unfortunately, what we do on the job, sometimes we get so hardened that we forget that we're dealing with people. And I remember when I was on the job, and I had lots of different jobs and assignments and iterations during my career. One of the things I did was I was the commander of our training academy in the agency that I worked for. And I remember wanting to instill in new recruits, the fact that whoever you're dealing with is a human being. And I used to say, you're going to see people, and sometimes, they're going to be at their worst, regardless of whether they are a suspect or a victim or a family member or, a witness or whoever. I said, because you got to understand, when we show up, people are having a bad day. And sometimes they're having the worst day they're ever going to have. And you got to remember that and be conscious of that with regard to your conduct. But I'm glad that you took the initiative to reach out to Andrea and try to let her know that we do care and that this is something that is important to us, and that we wanted to be partners with a group that's doing something so impactful. And I mean, obviously, the FOP has partnered with you guys, and so that's it's the same. I think along the same vein as that. We want to be part of something that's doing impactful work in a positive way in the community.
Well, what I find interesting is when we give these presentations to law enforcement and we talk about some of these things, inevitably at the end you will get people who come up to you and they have tears in their eyes or they're crying, and most times they don't tell you why, but they thank you because they needed to hear that. Mm-hmm. And so most of us have been impacted to some form or fashion with this crisis in particular, or at least have dealt with it enough that you carry that weight with you. So I do agree that there is that shield that we tend to put up in this profession. But I can also tell you that if you allow yourself to be a little vulnerable, the human side of things and the connection that you remember why you got into this job is unbelievably powerful. Mm-hmm. And it has made me a better detective. It's made me a better but more importantly, it's made me a better human being. And I think that carries over with what we do. And our profession is designed for people who care.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so inundated with the bad things, and you put up a shield to protect yourself from that. We do forget the ripple effects, which we'll talk about later, about these situations you discussed and people you encounter who really you are it, and how that goes in the first 30 seconds of your conversation or your body language is extremely important, because we never want anybody to feel like their loved one's just a number, and we certainly wouldn't want our loved ones to feel that way about us or vice versa.
And you said it right. Like you talked about the reason FOP partners with us. What we've found across the country, and now here in Colorado, is that law enforcement cares. Our Colorado law enforcement cares, and that's why these relationships happen. Law enforcement's been the foundation of the work that we've put out there, right? So even though Dan mentioned that there were these families in the beginning, and still are, that don't understand the laws and what it takes for investigation, right? There's a lot of pieces to that. And us bridging the gap, Facing Fentanyl, working with law enforcement, really opens people's eyes. And so to have Colorado step in after all these years, and our FOP is right there at the forefront with us, standing next to us, that means more than anything. Y'all are the heart of our communities. So it's everything to us, this kind of a relationship. So we appreciate it so much.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing that up and for saying that for us. Is there something you want to talk about, specifically like the work that the organization is doing,
Yeah, I can't even believe that we're in this space, right? Because as a parent, I'm an accidental advocate. I never thought I'd be doing this. I didn't know anything about the fentanyl crisis, or that one even existed in 2018. We weren't talking about this. And really our work centers at Facing Fentanyl around education, prevention, and connection, right? We've got to connect with people to get this information out there. So we bring together law enforcement and families, schools, legislators, and communities across the country. The biggest event that we have is the National Fentanyl Prevention and Awareness Day that happens on August 21st, who Facing Fentanyl is a founder of. And that brings leaders and organizations, health departments, law enforcement, our federal agencies all together on one day to put an exclamation point, right, on this message and encourage people to share the message every day. We have that flagship event in Times Square, so we're surrounded by those big billboards with our messaging on them, our federal law enforcement partners, the local law enforcement partners, and families from across the country. And so, this really is everyone coming together for a crisis like we've never seen before. It's not a drug crisis of the 80s and 90s, right? What we used to think about with old drugs, people in alleyways or in dangerous places. This is happening to the unsuspecting every day, and in a bigger way than we've ever seen it. So a lot of our work is just centered around reaching every part of every community, no matter what age they are, and giving free resources to help educate, right? And now through Armor to work those bigger pieces with science and data and innovation. I still can't imagine that we're even here. And if you were to go to the Colorado FOP site right now, you would be able to get our resources there for free. So just another way that Colorado law enforcement is showing that they care. And certainly they can go to our website at Facing Fentanyl now and get those pieces of education, learn. It's not just about the harms of the drug and the way that you think, how much can kill you, what types of drugs they are. There's really pieces for mental health, other drugs, and ways that you can support your community.
Oh, that sounds great. Dan, anything you want to add related to that same?
Yeah, so those resources and things are extremely valuable for our communities, right? And we do so. On the one end, right, with our presentations, we had a fentanyl presentation for a community night that we did that Andrea came, and Andrea and I both spoke with some other folks. It was really good, right? It was really good, and it led to other things afterwards, conversations with citizens and such, that we were able to follow up on some things and help them. But it really is a good education piece. And so when we do presentations, we have a lot of material for us, right? And to be able to push the narrative, because the education equals prevention, right? And that's the one part of the goal that we want to accomplish. The other thing that has really been an unbelievable, amazing journey is so these families, when we go out and we investigate these overdose deaths, we connect with the families. And so we now bridge that gap between law enforcement and what now, right? So we can kind of help them get to the next part for resources for other people in a really a worldwide community who are feeling the same thing they are, right? Because they've lost loved ones too. So what we do, and what has been a godsend to me, is when we meet with the families, and a lot of times it's moms, right, that we'll meet with, and we'll talk about facing fentanyl. We'll talk about the things we can do for them. And one of the things we do is that they create poster boards for us. So what we'll do is we'll get a photo of the loved one from the family that they would want to use. I'll send that into the Facing Fentanyl, and they will create a poster board that comes back. And they're beautiful poster boards. They're on the website, examples of them. But I always tell the moms or the families or the loved ones, whoever it is that I'm talking to about this, is that it's very important that the world sees your loved one's face. Because if they see the face, they'll hear the story without the words even being said. And that's extremely important. And there's no greater honor to me than when you are welcome into a grief circle of a family, in particular, a mother who has lost their child, lost their loved one. And so that's the least we can do. It costs the family nothing. But you see, when they go to the fentanyl events, they go to the Facing Fentanyl sponsored events, they go to Times Square on the National Day, their loved one goes with them because they now have the poster board. And the whole world gets to see their face. And that's extremely important for me, because what that does is it tells the family that we have not forgotten about your loved one. They were not just another number. And it's important for law enforcement that we have that connection. And the other thing that those poster boards do, and banners and such, there's all sorts of different things that we can create for families, is sometimes it gives people the confidence to be able to speak, or at least show up in public, because a lot of people don't want to relive what they've gone through. But it allows them to give them confidence, because in the end, what you're trying to do is not just memorialize their loved one, but you're trying to get the message to help prevent other families from having to go through that. So you give them some buy-in, and you give them a voice back. And they take them to court. We'll go to court. I'll sit in court with the families during proceedings, unless I'm testifying. Obviously, I have to. There's times I can't be in there, but they'll bring their poster board in, and they'll have it in, not during a trial or something when you can't use it, but on other hearings. We actually had a judge recently. The mom got up and spoke. It was early in the court process, so it wasn't anything anything being decided that day. And the judge, when the mom was done speaking for just a couple minutes, because she just wanted the judge to know that her son was a real person. He wasn't a ghost. He's not a ghost. He's a real person. And she had the poster board, and the judge, when she was done, said, "Ma'am, can I ask you a question? Where did you get such a beautiful picture of your son?" It humanized the moment. Court proceeding, legalities, we all understand that. There's procedures and things. But for the moment in time, it humanized the situation. And that meant more to her than anything you could imagine at that moment. So it's those things that Facing Fentanyl does. But it's not just about the poster boards. It's the connections that we make. One of the other beautiful things on their website, if you go on their website and go to the memorial gallery, you can click through alphabetically, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of pictures of people, families, that same picture they give us, with their permission, we upload it in the memorial gallery. So now they can go on the website and they can find their loved one in there, with a community of others who are in there, whose families are suffering the same grief that they are. So it builds a connection. And I tell them the world can see them there too, and it's important that they're there. And so I think having those options, as simple as it seems, is really powerful. And I couldn't be more honored to be associated with families and with people who I could not even imagine, but who really are appreciative. But sometimes when you take a picture with them, you see them smiling and they're holding their poster board. They're not smiling because they lost their loved one. They're smiling because you didn't forget about them.
This can happen to anybody's family. It's not like this is a one-off, right? A story that just happened to me. There's millions of me out there, millions of families like this. And we're not just looking at numbers. We tend to think of numbers if this hasn't affected us, right? Each one of those numbers is somebody's son or daughter or husband or wife, right? It's their child. So we have to keep it in that context. And there's not just that context, right? There's a bigger picture, right? There's a humanitarian crisis with this. There's a health crisis. There's an economic piece to this. There's so much more to it. So working with law enforcement and giving us, to somebody that's child has never even been recognized. These used to be looked at as overdoses. It was different for me in Ashley's case because there was an active investigation. They saw these people were dying and law enforcement was involved. But otherwise, she would have just been an overdose, right? Book closed, end of story. These aren't overdose deaths. These are poisonings. This is something that's happening purposely. We honor those that we have lost. We will continue to fight for them and be their voice. But the other work that we do, working with our federal law enforcement agencies, our local law enforcement agencies in states like we are now with the Colorado FOP, is extremely important because we bring that picture back, right? Law enforcement's on the front lines. They see this every day. They're inundated with it. And so we're coming back in, reminding people about the victims, the faces behind those victims, right? The families that are connected, all of the other pieces, and going into the workplace and giving presentations. We go into large corporate offices, and not only to educate those employees, but educate them to go home and take this information to their family. So we're working with everyone across the board on this issue and bringing in professionals. I'm certainly not a mental health facilitator, but I have people that can come in now and give us that information so we can reach further out than just our voice about who we lost. We do this, again, to save lives and make a difference to everyone's families.
And I think it's a very interesting point. You say it's a poisoning. This is not an overdose. It's a poisoning. A person, a human being,
Exactly.
was poisoned. What is the poison? What is fentanyl?
So it's a synthetic chemical, right, that's made in China. The Chinese government incentivizes chemical companies to make these chemicals, distribute them. They get tax incentives, all kinds of grant, monies, protections for them, right, to distribute these kind of chemicals. Well, if you're in China, people are not dying from fentanyl poisoning. So these precursors ship from China and other countries because they're very creative. These criminal networks are creative, and if you're focusing in on just on China, you're not right? There are countries around there, many countries that distribute this as well and produce them. But for the most part, China is the largest manufacturer. They ship them then to Mexico, and then those criminal cartels, transnational criminals, bring this into the U.S. And it is purposely made to addict and to take lives. You might use, we talk about this being so deadly, right? And a one-time use can kill you. But if you make it through and you last a little bit longer, eventually it's going to take your life. And we are losing military-age men and women every day. Our country is being affected like it never has been before. And so we really have to look at how we are a target to this. I didn't know these things in 2018, and I've learned a lot working with our government and officials that have a lot of this intel and information on this. We really are a target. And we have to bring in every bit of education and every resource that we have to address this. So not only are these dangerous cartels killing our youth through drug sales on the street, they reach them through social media, right? We had COVID. They're going in through social media, taking advantage of these young people and where they go to get their information or spend their social time. And, you can have these drugs delivered to your house as easy as you could a pizza. So it's like DoorDash. So we have to really be aware of how that goes down as parents, to look at these emojis, something that looks so innocent, right? And really our drug language, and explain to our kids what's going on and how they can protect themselves.
And one of the things too, right? The government says that, 2 milligrams is a potential lethal dose, right, for folks. Kind of the misnomer out there is, so when you talk to somebody, who's got a substance use disorder, right, and they're smoking fentanyl, and they tell you they're doing 10, 15, 20 pills a day, right? At first you think, well, that's not possible because, you smoke a fentanyl pill, you'll die, right? But the interesting thing about it is, because it's illicit and it's made in, elsewhere, right? The best analogy I've heard is it's like if you make homemade chocolate chip cookies, right? You put the chips in, you mix it all up, you put your cookies out there. Is every cookie going to have the same amount of chocolate chips in them?
No.
No. So fentanyl is no different. So you may get a pill that has absolutely no fentanyl. You may get a pill that has 1 milligram, maybe you're just under, or whatever, right? It varies. And maybe your tolerance is enough that you can handle the two, right? It's not your first time. Until you get the one. First time or not, you get the one that's too much. And so that's where I think people get, sometimes they're not, maybe they don't have all the information to understand that, the chances of you dying if you continue to use fentanyl are great. That's just what it is. The odds are stacked against you. But a lot of times, right, you don't know how much you're ingesting. So your first time may be your last, or it may be quite a while before. But eventually, that's what's going to happen. So not all of them are the same. And that's where I think sometimes we initially were like, well, there's no way you could do that. Well, if you're getting pills that have less than the 2 milligrams, you probably are. But in the end, right, you eventually your luck will run out, and that's what happens.
And when we talk about poisoning, going back to the beginning of the question, when we talk about poisoning versus overdose is when you take too much of something. These are illicit drugs. There's no prescribed amount. There's no these aren't made in some scientific lab somewhere. They're made in clandestine labs. From bad actors that aren't putting chemicals together for your best interest, okay? Yeah. So 2 milligrams of this is potent. We see worse drugs emerging every day. So we can't just stop with fentanyl, right? Because there are other chemicals coming in. We have these nitazines, metazidionines, all of these other drugs, right? And so we've got to be proactive. But these are poisonings. When something so minute, a couple of grains of salt or sugar is about 2 milligrams, that's not an overdose of something. That's a poisoning. And even bigger is when you're taking something like a pill that looks to be prescription. Why would you have reason to think, as a non-drug user, that that's going to harm you? We don't die from one pill. Now we do. And it's not just in these counterfeit pills that we're talking about. It's in every illicit drug that's out there. So, we live in a state where we have legal marijuana, and there are dispensaries for those purchases and everything, but you don't know when you're buying something on the street what's in it. So it can be in anything. It's not the old drugs of yesterday. So we really have to be aware of that, and street drugs really now can take your life just one time.
And because it's illicit, the people that are involved in the production of it and the distribution of it, their only motivation is profit. They're doing this to make money, so they're not really interested necessarily in science or any kind of efficacy. It's really just about, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make money. If there's a demand, or if I can create a demand for it, that's going to be my focus. And which is really, I think, the problem with all illicit drugs, very honestly, is just, there's no regard, no concern for the human lives that are going to be impacted by it. Even if it's not fatal, just the addiction is such a powerful impact in a negative way for a person. Putting them in a hole that they're going to have to climb out of if they're able to.
Yeah.
If they're able to.
Well, drug distribution is a very selfish act, right? Because you're preying on the weakness of others and the struggles of others for a profit. And I always say, if you go on an overdose death scene and there's generally it's fentanyl related, you'll see there's a piece of foil or something there with a partial pill still left on there. And in our area, pills are going $2 to $4, right, to give or take, but on the inside. So let's just say it's $4 that this person paid, and now they're deceased, laying on the floor. And there's a half a pill, so we'll say that's $2 worth. So it begs the question: what's the value of human life? Is it the $4 a person paid for the pill, or is it the $2 that's left on the piece of foil. And the reality of it is it's a loaded question because human life is priceless, right? There is no numeric value to it, no matter who you are. But drug distribution and those who are involved in it and those who create it, the product to be able to distribute, try to put a number on that. An albeit low, ridiculous number, right? But they try to put a number on the value of human life when they sell this stuff, especially when it comes to fentanyl. And make no bones about it. And I want to say this, that there has to be accountability. Even if you have a substance use disorder and you don't harm anybody, but you sit around and you get your fix every day because you need it. If you commit a crime because of your disorder, then you have to be accountable. What that looks like, who knows, right? I mean, treatment options, things on the lower end. So we don't want people to think that we're advocating for no accountability. There has to be accountability. That's how people get on the straight and narrow or work towards that path.
That's right.
But for people in those situations, they're being taken advantage of because of their daily disorder that they deal with. Then there has to be other options that we can try to navigate through as law enforcement and as a community and legislators and with the partnerships that we have.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we know it's a crisis in the U.S. I mean, is there a way to quantify the crisis?
Yeah, our numbers are so understated, right? Because we don't have systems in place to track this. So we take, not to the efficiency that we should, right? We take these numbers that we get every year in the hundreds of thousands, right? Upwards of 100, 125,000 people a year. Well, over the last several years, right, we're looking at millions of people. So you have that victim that has died from fentanyl poisoning. You have all associated to that victim. So the families, the fallout that happens there, the economic costs to our country, to our states. I think in 2023, our number had already hit $2.3 trillion for health care and, the law enforcement aid that we need to this and family aid. There's so much to it. These deaths are poisonings. They're not overdoses. So when we're talking about this and we think about where are the naloxone numbers, because that's the only real antidote that we have right now to reverse some of these poisonings or overdoses, right? And it doesn't always work. Sometimes it's too late. How many reversals do we have in a day? What if we put those numbers in? And what if we had all of our agencies working together to incorporate and to combine the numbers that they're getting so that we can get really a true picture of this? So we've got to look at data systems, making things better. One pill can kill. But when you look at this overall picture that's happening to the United States, what is the fallout going to look like in 10 years, right? Colorado numbers for these poisoning deaths have risen significantly. We've risen about 70% from 2021 for these deaths. So this is a crisis like we've never seen, but it is one that we have to put at the top of the list. We have to prioritize it to address it with everything that we have. So every age group is dying. When we're talking about a toddler, an infant that's had an accidental exposure, seniors, our youngest people are dying at the fastest rate that they ever have. What's more important? What does our future look like? So we have to give this everything that we have.
And Andrea touched on a big factor that we in law enforcement sometimes tend to forget because we're busy working on the investigation, right? We're busy, we're going call to call, or this is going to be a big deal, so we really got to focus. My mind is set where I'm trained to do, right? What I'm an expert in. But it's the ripple effects. You see, when regardless of what you feel about a person you walk in, maybe they're laying on the floor, they're deceased, right? And it's clear probably what happened to them. Regardless of your thoughts, because about whether they deserve that or not, or whether, well, shame on you, you shouldn't take something if it's going to the potential to kill you, or whatever the case may be. But you see, the interesting piece to me about that is that your ultimate accountability, if you are involved in that, or you take things that you don't know what it is your death. If you die, that is your accountability. So regardless, I'm not here to change people's minds about what you feel about the person on the floor. That is their accountability that they suffered. But when you stop, and if you just stop there, you're missing the whole picture. It's the children. it's the wife, it's the parents, it's you all across the board, right? It's those things that all of a sudden those ripple effects become so important, but they're so far reaching, and so that's why having partnerships, right, for CDIA, my task force, other law enforcement people, FOP, to have this connection is important because those ripple effects they see all the time. And so if we keep that in mind when we're going to these things and we're working with families, that the ripple effects, we get to go to the next call or go home. They will never forget and have to live that. So the ripple effects are something, if you keep that in mind, it helps the bigger picture come into play. And then maybe you can give some resources or be able to be that conduit for the family when they have no one else to turn to at that moment.
Law enforcement in our society now has been put into a position where they carry more than what they're not out there only fighting crime. A lot of responsibility lies in their lap from their community members, just kind of like imposing everything on law enforcement. And so they're asked to have education and resources and work pieces that didn't used to be in the picture for them. And so bridging that together, us working together, we can fill some of those gaps for them and let them use their time where it most needs to be spent. And that's protecting our communities. We have to give law enforcement the tools and the resources they need to be able to do that. The law is to protect them because that's what protects our communities. And we need to talk about that.
Well, I mean, I think it's what you said is important about the resources, and every law enforcement officer knows when they run into different situations or they encounter different situations. Oftentimes, having a resource that they can refer someone to, or even utilize themselves, is going to make the outcome so much more positive, or helpful. Where something that's already bad situation, already horrible, can at least have some mitigation. And so that's important, what you guys are doing, having that resource.
Well, and it's twofold for us, right? Because for law enforcement, I'm going to tell you, I've been to the Capitol, right, and testified with Andrea. I have been to D.C., right, and talked to legislators from our state about these various issues, as has Andrea. And the thing about it is having these partnerships, right, and having this support, not just for the resources. Well, I guess another facet of the resources is when we want tougher legislation or we want a change in legislation, whatever that might look like, our biggest advocates are the families. And Facing Fentanyl, which in and of itself is a force to be reckoned with across the nation. So when you're standing with them and they're testifying, or you are and they're right there next to you, it really does validate law enforcement's moves. And legislation, we know over the years and just over time, they're not always wanting to give law enforcement what they want. They, think we want everything. We always want something. Well, on particular issues, when we have that, now we have families and we have voices for other families who cannot get up and speak. And that is powerful. And even if you don't necessarily, the outcome isn't quite what you hope for, I guarantee you, and I've seen it and I felt it in the legislative sessions in the rooms that we're in, it humanizes it and you're forced to think about it. Even if you don't vote the way we'd like you to, it still sends a message because it's just part of the human process of it. And so for law enforcement to have the resources on top of the backing, and it comes into play so much because we all want the same goal. And public health is no different. We sit down and have conversations, and sometimes we have opposing views, of course, right? But it's okay to disagree.
That's
if
right.
in the end you want safer communities, right, and you want people to be better, in the end, if those are our goals, no matter what road we take to get there, we're going to meet you there. But if we have the conversations and we have the support of these kind of organizations and these wonderful people who are living it, it really does validate what we're trying to do, and it's genuine, right? And it does start those conversations, and then we realize we're not really that much different.
No,
So
I agree. And in preparing for this episode, I looked at the Facing Fentanyl website. A lot of great information on there, and so I looked specifically at the fentanyl facts. But I know there's a part on the website that deals with education, And so, I kind of wanted to look at some of that right now and let you
Yeah.
guys talk about some of the things that are up there so that people can know what, how to access these things and what great information is there.
Well, certainly we work with our legislators at a federal and state level. We work everywhere, right? But this education page is very helpful to everyone in the community. So if you go to our education website at facingfentanylnow.org, what you'll see is handouts that update continuously. We are always adding to this. And they're all free. You can download them all. So whether you're having your own event or you just want to use them for your family, or to learn about the dangers of fentanyl, they're all right there for you. We have added resources for newer drugs, these emerging drugs, the nitazines, the xylazines. There's a lot of polydrug use out there with fentanyl. So we've got to talk about not just fentanyl. We have to have a more well-rounded picture of what's happening on the streets and in your homes. We've recently added marijuana to that because we see people passing from laced marijuana. Are we suggesting cartels are bringing that in? We're not. We're just saying it's a possibility. Why would you think it's not if it's in every other drug out there? And we have proof. There are recovery options, information for families. We've recently built a Recovery Ready Families program because we want to talk to you not about only when your young people are in recovery or are already have used or experimented. We want to talk to you before you get to that point, right? How to open the conversation up. And it's different for every family and every situation. But if you know there's others out there and what's working for them, you just draw your own, bring it into your family and use the parts of it that work and have that conversation. So there's a lot on that education website. It's all free, and we can tailor presentations and information to different people because we have a lot of resources and a lot of knowledge now.
And so, you guys, that's something else. You guys are available to do presentations to groups, any group.
Dan's been with me in Quantico. We go down to FBI. We present to America's Elite down there. We do that quarterly. We go into the workplace, into the schools, speaking with our federal law enforcement partners always. And finally, we're at a time where people are listening. Like I said, we work these pieces of legislation and now science and innovation because we can't be reactive all the time to this. We have to be proactive and have solutions that are going to stop this before it starts, whatever is the next drug that comes in after fentanyl, because there are many and they're already here and they'll continue to be more because these synthetics are so cheap to make and tweak, right? We outlaw one, make progress there, and they're going to bring another one in. Yeah. So we work now for larger solutions through Armor, whether it is immunotherapies or recovery alternatives or fentanyl vaccines, and the data to be able to see where the solutions need to be and what we need to target. And that is every bit as important as the prevention and awareness. We've been screaming from the rooftops, families like mine, but really we need to look at this in a bigger way and put all of our efforts in on the science side too. So.
And for us, we train our victim advocates in our county on this as well. So when they go out with us on these unfortunate scenes, they are equipped at least with the general knowledge of what this foundation does, and they can have those talks with those families as well. So it really helps build our team and helps get that message out with other people who will have more association with the families generally than we will, because we're in the investigation side and they're sitting with them trying to help them navigate what's next.
And Dan's department just put in a naloxone machine in their entryway, and this is another thing that we work, right? Training people how to save a life. And adding naloxone as part of a first aid kit, because this is so prevalent and can happen anywhere. And so getting naloxone into schools, the workplace, and just communities everywhere and having easy access to it when you're in an emergency crisis is something that's really important to us, and we share a lot of that information too.
So an officer responding to an incident involving a victim of fentanyl, is there anything specific that you would like officers to know when they're responding to that incident?
Yeah, I mean, from the family side of it, Dan and I talk about this a lot, how to get this information out to families and law enforcement, right? When you know, when losing Ashley, I didn't get a phone call, right? She was a 32-year-old woman. I found out many hours after she had died that she was gone. And I found out from a family member that somebody else had reached out to. And there's protocol, right? There are laws, there are reasons that we protect people and don't just go off and make phone calls. But there's a family behind that victim. And so I understand that when you see victim after victim after victim, how it can harden someone and you kind of just go into autopilot, right? But that person, that victim, is not any different than maybe your son or daughter at home. You know, we're not a bunch of just bad parents raising these kids that are going out and using drugs. It can happen to anyone now. And so remembering the family behind that, remembering protocols for investigation, and there are so many now, right? Years ago, when Ashley died in 2018, most of the law enforcement in my county didn't even know about illicit fentanyl, right? Federal agents came in with that information. So training is very important. And, you know, thank goodness Colorado has stepped up to that place where they're informing their officers about investigation technique, reach out to these families, and compassion, some empathy there. That goes a very, very long way. When Ashley died and I didn't know anything, I began my own investigation because I couldn't communicate with federal law enforcement at that point on an investigation. And one investigator would reach out to me. I would check in actually every 30 days with my local PD. And the investigator that was working my daughter's case that had never laid eyes on her, didn't know her, didn't know us, was working tirelessly to get the information on how all of these people were killed. And he told me to hang on, just hang on. Please hang on. We're still looking. We're still working. That meant everything to me. When you have no answers and somebody is telling you we care, because that's what that meant to me. It was all that we had to hang on to. And I will always remember that. And so just something that small can be so important to a family that's in a situation like ours.
And it really goes back to the perception that you don't want to give the perception that their family didn't mean anything, their loved one, or, was just a number, right? Or, well, shame on them. They shouldn't have been doing what they were doing, right? And so I think that's she hit the nail on the head when you show up to these scenes. For the first 2 minutes, I remind myself I need to be a human being. Whether that's hard or not for people, you've got to be a human being. So this family, at least you acknowledge them and you acknowledge what's happening. Because then, as soon as those 2 minutes are up, give or take, I got to put on the work hat. Now I got to ask questions, right? When was the last time you saw them? Did you know them to use? Do you know, where's their phone? All these things, right? So I think if you can try to connect at the beginning and at least make them initially trust you, that you're going to not just do your best, but that you don't view their loved one as just another person that's not around anymore. I think that's huge. It is huge. It makes such a big difference to people, and that's how that process starts.
Is there something specific, or maybe a few things that you would like to relate of how the common impacts of this poisoning, this murder?
Well, it starts at the family level, right? The fabric of our society is our families.
Yes.
That's what makes us so strong. And that's where we all originate. So when you lose someone in your family to something that's preventable, something that's unexpected, right? It takes us down. You watch your family fall all around you. And oftentimes as a parent, you can't help them, right? Because you've fallen too, right? So there's the core of everything. And then, like I've said several times already, it impacts the community around us. We're losing so many people. Think about all of the young minds, all of these strengths that we've lost, people that were unsuspecting, and all they could have brought to our world, right? So as this continues to grow, we're going to begin to see the impacts of that. We don't even know, I think, what this looks like for us in 10 or 15 years with the loss of life and the effects it's taken on our families, the fallout that comes after this. I have a 7-year-old grandson. I'm blessed that I have the resources to take care of him and that I'm young enough to do that still, right? But there are seniors out there raising one or more infants because they've lost both their parents to fentanyl poisoning. What does that look like? So to me, that's the core. But then we look at the economic costs, right? So people don't think about the health care. They don't think about the criminal activity that grows from drug use. Criminal activity always goes back somehow to drug use.
Yes.
We look at these as nonviolent crimes. They're violent at every level.
That's right.
From the minute that they leave that country to ship to Mexico and come through. Lives have been destroyed all down that path, right? This is a violent crime. It's like a WMD, one by one, or who knows who's going to come in at some point and take many people out from these type of chemicals. So we really need to not just think of it in terms of, oh, so-and-so, my neighbor lost someone, poor them. No, it's a lot bigger with a drug crisis like this because it can affect everyone's household. There is no one that is immune from this because it's hitting every social group, every economic group, every age. So we really want people to think about this issue outside of just old drugs and a drug user and what we used to think about drugs. And the more that we talk about this type of thing, the more the conversation can happen, right? It lessens the stigma. This can happen in anybody's family. And so we really need to look at it from all angles. There's so much to it.
And if I may, I take just a quick minute and share my personal story. I have a cousin who passed last year. He's 52, had a 14-year-old son that's an honor roll student and an athlete in a little 600-person town. We all grew up in Nebraska, rural Nebraska. And he had struggles throughout his life. His sister, my other cousin, I had a lot of cousins in that family, but was 2 years older than us. She was really, really close to him. And he was a good guy. He just had struggles. Well, I found out after he passed that the person who gave him the fentanyl came from Colorado to Nebraska. They were best friends. It turned out to be my best friend from elementary school all the way through high school. When we were back there during elementary school, we moved to Colorado. I would go back every summer and stay with my cousins and my best friend at the time. And again, I hadn't had contact with them recently, but when I found that out, I was stunned. I never believed that would have happened. But then on top of that, the paramedic who shows up when my ex, I guess, friend, whatever, when he does the right thing and calls it in, when my cousin's not responsive, that paramedic was my other cousin, his sister's best friend. She had to call her out in Lincoln, Nebraska area. She had to call her to tell her that her brother was gone.
Wow.
So when we talk about the ripple effects, and his story is no different than hundreds of thousands of others that are there, but it's just, as she points out, it can happen to any of us. And so it's a good reminder. And so my personal success story with that was we made a poster board for my cousin. They put my cousin's picture up in Times Square on the billboard to honor him, to honor his memory, and a link that the family could tune in to see him up there. And it's not just me that do it. They do it for so many people. But the point was, right, is that I have lived it from one end to the other, and it really is amazing the care and the be able to provide that for people and receive that on your own.
It's important to those families, and then we use each one of those faces to educate America, right? Because if you were to go look at our banners or our website that has memorial pictures on it, you see every kind of face that's out there. You see your next door neighbor's face, right? You're not seeing somebody in a dark alley on the side of a street. These are real people, and these are people that you're not looking at your vision of what you think was a drug addict or a drug dealer, right? These are across the board, every face that you can see in America, from infants to moms and dads and kids of all ages. And it really opens your eyes when you're talking about education and reaching out to young people and saying, look, this happened to me. Here's my daughter. She went to your school. her son goes here. This is happening in communities and to people all around us. So those faces, those pictures are very important to us.
And you mentioned, Dan, that there was a success story for you in part of this, and so let's talk about tactics and strategies that are effective, that in fighting this crisis. And what would you like people to know about those things?
Well, I think partnerships in communities are very important because even, I remember American Trucking Association reached out to us, and I thought, how am I going to work with the American Trucking Association? And they said, what can we do to help? Because they're great in reaching out to communities across the country and working with our legislatures and solving problems. So I thought, well, we'll get some of those stickers, right? Those, like you see, breast cancer awareness stickers. And that'll alert people to fentanyl poisoning. And they just kind of chuckled and said, we're going to do better than that. We're going to wrap trucks and we're going to put the message on the highways. And so now we have partnerships with the American Trucking Association, like we do FOP, that is going to put our information out where the public can see it. And that makes a huge difference. Anyone can do this. I don't just have to work with law enforcement. Facing Fentanyl doesn't just have to work with people that know about fentanyl. Anyone in the community, everyone has a voice. So to me, that's a huge way to reach out, share the message, but just talk about it. Talk about it in your homes. If you were to sit down with your young people, we always think that there's going to be this perfect opportunity, or these great words that we're going to say, right? Sit down, do it now. We know when, that the message is working when parents come up to us and say, I heard what you had to say, and I went out to my car when I left, and I called my kids from the car. I wasn't going to wait any longer. I was going to tell them right now. That makes a difference. So something very small, a social media post on your Facebook or whatever it is, just talking about it can save lives, and communities can come in with resources or help, ways to share the message, and they don't have to be law enforcement centered. They can be anyone.
And I think, what I always say is that we have to believe, especially law enforcement, we have to believe that what we do makes a difference, right? And I'll share a quick little story because, and maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't, and maybe some of the listeners have, but it's the starfish story. It's an old story, and it basically goes that an old man was walking down to the beach to do some riding or whatever he was going to do, and he sees this small child down at the beach at the water's edge, and it looks like it's throwing stuff into the ocean. So as he gets closer, he says to this child, young man, what are you doing? And he says, the noon sun is high, the tide is coming in, and if I don't get these starfish off the beach, they'll die. And the old man looks up and down the beach, and there's, miles of starfish laying up on the shore, and he kind of smiles at the little boy, and he says, he goes, there's miles and miles of starfish. You can't possibly make a difference. So the little boy picks up a starfish, throws it into the ocean, looks at the old man and smiles and says, I made a difference to that one. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the lesson. The story is beautiful. I don't do it justice when I tell it without reading it off a card. But in the end of the day, it applies to so many things in life. But it absolutely applies to what we're talking about here. The partnerships between, Colorado FOP, right? Mm-hmm. Between the Colorado Drug Investigative Association, my task force, my agency, other law enforcement partners, is so valuable, right? And we have to believe that all these things that we do and all these things that maybe on the front end you're not seeing immediate results, but you have to believe they make a difference. Mm-hmm. And you have to believe because the little boy, the little child in the starfish story told you so. Yeah. Right? He teaches you. They teach you that. And so we have to believe that. And then when you see mom smile, not because they lost their loved one, they smile because you didn't forget it. And they smile because they have a voice. Then you know what you're doing is the right thing to be doing, and you know that you're doing it on a level that you probably never imagined in your life you would connect with. And that doesn't even get into all the legislative and other stuff that we briefly touched on as well. But it all impacts it, and I think that that's huge. And it costs nothing to partner with Facing Fentanyl. It costs nothing to partner with wonderful organizations who are out there to make our communities better, which is the same thing, ironically, we're trying to do.
When we think about hope, right? Like so many times people ask me, why do you keep doing this? Because people continue to die and the numbers have increased over time, right? Yeah. Imagine if we didn't do this. And in the beginning, when we were, I was blind to this too. I was looking at law enforcement too and saying, where are these people? Why are they on the streets? I didn't have a full understanding of what all of that meant and what it took to prosecute. It goes way beyond law enforcement, right? We're talking about our justice systems and many other pieces here. And so to think about standing side by side, our family standing side by side with law enforcement and all wanting the same things. In this state and across the United States, you'll hear, we can't arrest our way out of this, right? Well, we're here to say we agree. There's a lot of other pieces to this, and law enforcement is just one of them, right? But them standing with us means so much to us. When there's been, nobody said your child's name. Nobody, it seems as if they care, has even that they've passed. So when Dan is sitting, or some of our other law enforcement, next to a mother in a courtroom that would normally be sitting there by herself and not even understanding really what all is happening and living in that moment, that means everything to them. And so these partnerships are so valuable to us. And now with Colorado FOP sharing these materials on their websites, that gives us great reach. And hopefully we have a national partnership to continue to share our messages, someone else's, all that we can to reach the heart of every community and save lives.
Well, and I think, there's most significant problems in society are not one-dimensional.
No.
They're multidimensional. And I've heard that when I've been at the legislature testifying. You can't arrest our way out of this. No, we can't. That's not the only solution.
No.
But it is part of the solution.
Yes.
It is part of the facets that we have to employ. And we absolutely have to do other things like education, like treatment, like, providing, services, and all that. And we never, one of the things that I have to remind a lot of elected officials, we don't oppose any of that either.
No.
We're in favor of those things as well.
Correct, yes.
That's right.
But we can't get to those pieces unless we are first dealing with something that's a criminal act. Right. And unless we're responsible, holding people accountable for a criminal act, then we can do the other things as well.
We always say in these presentations, we're in a time in America that people are dying, and we're not seeing it for what it is. You can't kill someone and let that go and not be accountable.
Yes.
If I got in my car and I hit somebody because I was drunk driving or had a couple of glasses of wine, I would have to be accountable. Everyone does, and that is a piece of it, and that is a deterrent, and it works. And we can't forget about that. And we can work on all of those other pieces too. Addiction, recovery, our communities.
So obviously, someone wanting to get more information and education on this, obviously they can go to your website, facingfentanylnow.org. Any other place you would direct them to? Any other thing you would want them to know if they're trying to get more information? Well,
I would tell them, you see what community resources that you have. If there are events in your community, go to them. Take your kids. This is information everyone should have. So they can call us. They can reach out to FOP's website. Our other law enforcement divisions in Colorado carry this information. Loveland PD carries it. CDIA has this information. Our law enforcement has been great with partnering with us and helping us get it out there. But just talk to your kids. Have an open, honest conversation and just hear what they know. And then let them have some information on what they don't know. This isn't going to get them started if they don't know. They're not going to go run out and use drugs. But talk to them about social media and these dangers. And there's so many more dangers along with this, right? We don't even talk about, or we rarely hear people talking about the human trafficking, the homelessness, the loss of family, potential incarceration. So keep talking about it over time. Add bits and pieces. And it can really make a big difference in your life and hopefully save your kids from a journey like this or your family from losing someone.
Any specific legislative activity or actions, endeavors that you guys are involved with or that maybe we should create or start
Yeah, definitely. I think we
Initiate.
need education in schools, and that should be something Colorado works on. We work on these issues at federal levels, but for our state, education in schools is very important, and we don't see that right now, or we see very little of it. Accountability, right?
Yeah.
Accountability for these distributors that are taking so many lives. They know what they're doing. Fentanyl's in everything.
Yes.
So we need to address accountability. Tougher penalties for these crimes when you're killing people, when you're tearing families apart. And then, of course, we have those that are addicted. So we need to look at options for recovery. And remember, this isn't old drugs. So our old recovery methods don't even work for some of this. So we've got to, and recovery, it's different for everyone. So we need to embrace those issues too, and mental health, because all of this sometimes, many parts of this goes down to a core issue when people are much younger and not even thinking about drugs. So we've got to think about the mental health piece of it too, and giving our law enforcement and our justice systems laws to work with that can be effective and really create change.
And we've talked about, some of the partnerships that we have here. Is there any other partnerships or organizations you'd like to highlight or mention as being involved in this effort?
Yeah, I mean, we recently went in, going back to the legislation question, in a partnership with Action Colorado, and they've got a ballot measure out right now that people will get to make that choice of what they think about the fentanyl crisis and what those penalties should look like. So they've been wonderful to work with. We have national billboard campaigns across the U.S. During the National Day with Lamar billboards, and they scour the country with these messages on our behalf of families to get the message out there. And working with our CDIA here in Colorado, that was one of the first greatest steps for us here in Colorado, to reach out to law enforcement and know that our Colorado drug investigators take this very seriously. And they think about that in these pieces of investigation and in the work they do. And of course, our Colorado FOP. I mean, we've been on cloud nine for couple of weeks here talking about that partnership and what that can mean and what it can mean to communities in Colorado.
We're excited about it as well. How can people get involved if they want to? If there's people who specifically looking to get involved in some way, what would you suggest?
Well, you can reach out to us to volunteer. You can take the information that we have on our websites and share it with someone. Even the smallest things, we need every piece of this, right? Everyone has something that they can offer. So whether it's a conversation or sharing a news story or some of our materials, they're all important. You can donate. You can, a gift that can help education and awareness projects and legislation to save lives. That's very important, and any amount counts, right? So everyone can act in any way, whether it's if you're a business owner and you've got a warning in your window, or cards from our Colorado law enforcement that have these warnings on the back of them, educating people, and that have tip lines. All those things matter. So if you don't know how to participate in this, you can always reach out to us, and we can talk about different ways that
Great.
you can help in your community.
And for my law enforcement colleagues, our task force and our commander up there is 100%, tremendously supportive of this and my involvement and our involvement in what we do for the communities and such. And my agency is no different. And so CDIA, obviously, we've talked about them. They are very supportive with this movement. So I would say, if you want to be involved as law enforcement, reach out and you can help your own communities that way. It costs you nothing. If you have families that need a poster board or resources that have lost somebody and you think that this would be really helpful, let us know. And our hope is that other agencies will see that other agencies are supporting this, right? And that doesn't cost anything, doesn't cost a body. It's something that we do as we go along. And so I think that my hope is that really sets the example for others, and just to inspire others to do something different and see that it doesn't cost really anything, but what you get out of it with the communities and your partnerships and your welcoming at the table where public health and everybody's at, to have those kind of conversations and come up with creative strategies and solutions. It's amazing. So I would encourage my law enforcement colleagues, that anybody that's interested, or if even for admins, like, well, what do they do? How does this look? We can absolutely explain it, and we will go give presentations anywhere somebody wants one. So that's been a really good thing.
Yeah, and I think, some of the things like what we've done in my hometown is we started a PD challenge, right? And we're sharing this across the country with our friends through National Crime Prevention Council. And, each one of our police departments now have a place where you can film. They have their own equipment. This is free, right? Pulling in an officer in, or a family member to stand with them and just share these dangers in a 60-second PSA. Takes you an hour to do it, and we help write those scripts even. And this is something that you can share on your social media, and that can reach a lot of people. So when Dan was talking about free resources, that's another one. Simple. It's not time consuming, and you have so many people tuning into your social media sites, the good guys and the bad guys, the information gets out.
This has been a lot of great information. I think it's going to be helpful for anyone who sees this episode. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to come here and share this. We're excited about the partnership. We're excited about getting more information and doing more work around this topic. And so just thank you again for being here.
We thank you.
Yes, we thank you.
FacingFentanylNow.org. We'll have that also in our on YouTube and in the link for our podcast, so people will know. And we look forward to working this partnership in the future.
Appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.